Hello everyone, my name is Richard Matsas. I'm a general paediatrician here at Middlemore Hospital, and I'm presenting our study on implementing the Bedside Paediatric Early Warning System, which is known as BedsidePEWS, onto our wards here at Kids First. My co-investigators in this are Shirley Lawrence, who's a paediatric research nurse at the back of the room, and Kristen Middow, who's a research nurse, and Chris Parshram, who's a paediatric intensivist, both from Toronto in Canada. Locally, we have no declarations, but Chris and Kristen are the named inventors of BedsidePEWS, and they have shares in Bedside Clinical Systems, which is a kind of a company part owned by the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto, and they manage the whole BedsidePEWS system. So this talk is all about observation charts used to detect sick and deteriorating children. And this is our old observation chart, and I've done a mock-up of one based on a real patient. And as you can see, there's no clues really as to the age of the child. There's certainly no visual cues as to whether these observations are in the normal range or not. And we wanted to go beyond this type of chart, implement a more detailed early warning system chart. We wanted to do it as part of a quality initiative, and we wanted to do it in the context of research, and hence we contacted the Canadian team who supported us, but we received no funding from them for the study. This is their system called BedsidePEWS, and for the time I've put it all on one slide as a summary, but it basically involves a documentation record seen on the left, where there are 7 parameters that add up to give you a severity of illness score, which is between 0 and 26. And there's different charts for different age ranges, 5 different charts. But importantly, linked to the chart are these things called score-matched care recommendations, which are guides to staff to give actions and escalations depending on the score. Things like how often nursing obs should be done, how often when a doctor should be called, and how often a doctor should see them, things like that. So the study design is simply a before and after implementation study, and it occurred between August 2012 and March 2015, with the intervention being the implementation of BedsidePEWS. So there was 6 months lead-in data using the old chart, and then 2 years of data collection using this system. And there is a gap of 4 weeks for the data presentation today that we left out right at the implementation period in case there was teething issues. But the main outcome, and the first and foremost one, is will this have an effect on the urgent ICU admissions from the ward, from before and after? And we also wanted to look at a subgroup of those urgent ICU admissions, which we call late ICU admissions, and those are the sickest kids who need significant circulatory support or intubation before reaching ICU or within 1 hour of admission to ICU. And then thirdly, which is kind of quite important to me and our team, was how well would we do completing the documentation and adhering to the system over this whole 2-year period. So how good was this system as a quality initiative? And we wanted to do it well to get good data for the study. We knew implementation was going to be vitally important, so we early on set up a leadership team of myself and senior nurses, and we had excellent remote support from the Canadian team who provided us with all the educational material, and we rolled this out to all doctors and nurses in the 2-month period before implementation. And then when we implemented, we didn't stop there. We had nurse champions who constantly reviewed charts, ensuring they were being filled in well, going back to staff who may have not done it so well, so we could maintain a high standard throughout. Shirley randomly selected 5 patients per week over the course of the study, and we looked at 500 patients with 2,345 data sets, and kind of impressively I think we found that the 7 items were documented correctly 97.1% of the time over the 2-year post-implementation period. And the frequency of observations as determined by those score-matched care recommendations was followed nearly 92% of the time. And somewhat surprisingly, we seemed to add up very well as well, with only a 0.3% error rate. And the bottom line is saying to us that actually throughout the whole 2-year period, that high level of completeness was maintained. And often in implementation studies, you start off with a hiss and a bang, and then it kind of all falls away a bit thereafter. So how many patients did we look at? Well, we looked at just over 13,500 patient discharges over 2.5 years, amounting to 32,000 ward patient days. And over that 2.5-year period, there were almost 500 ICU admissions, of which 198 were eligible for analysis because they were the ones from the ward going to the ICU. All the rest went there from ED. And so there were 382 patient days out of those. So, results. The main income was that urgent ICU admission from the ward. And we looked at the rate, which is the events per 1,000 patient days, and we found that there was a statistically significant reduction post-implementation with a p-value of 0.029. Looking at that subgroup of late ICU admissions, even though there was a trend downwards, it didn't reach statistical significance. And of course, there was only 15 patients in that group, so quite a small number. Just as a comparison, we looked at urgent ICU admissions from ED where BedsidePEWS hadn't been implemented at that stage. And there was no change before or after over the course of the study. So it seemed to be business as usual from there. And also transfers to Starship, essentially transfers to Starship PECU, were unchanged as well over the whole duration of the study. So the only change came from the ward to ICU admissions. Mortality, just as a note, we only had one death from the ward in the whole course of the study, and that was in the post-implementation period. And there was a total of 9 that occurred, but they were all ED presentations or ED to ICU. So as far as a study goes, the strength of this is that for a single centre study, this is the largest of this type of study that we've seen. In terms of sample size and duration for a before and after study to do with this early warning systems. And it was successfully implemented, there's no doubt about that, and we were very pleased that because of the high sustained documentation adherence, we had good data to analyse. You could argue though that 6 months lead-in doesn't seem that long, but there was still 6,700 patient days worth of data in that period. And we covered some of our busiest months in that period as well. And also, as far as generalizability, our admission criteria may differ to other hospitals, where they may keep a baby with bronchiolitis with CPAP on the ward, for example, as we send them to our ICU. So in conclusion, the BedsidePEWS was associated with significant reductions in urgent ICU admissions from the ward, but not late ICU admissions. Why? Probably multifactorial. Were we detecting them earlier, stabilising them? Did we keep them longer after an ICU admission because we had better monitoring ability? I don't know, but it didn't result in an increase in late ICU admissions. It actually had a reduction. There was no change to transfers, no change to ED to ICU admissions. And importantly, it was an implementation success. We adhered to it well, high documentation completeness. So going back to that whole aim of having a good quality initiative, we felt it was a great success. And this is all a testament to the hard work of the nurses who made it happen. And I'd certainly like to acknowledge our leadership team here and the support from the Canadian team. And I'd welcome any questions in the last minute and a half if there are any.